Nepotism is a unique scam that thrives because critics and beneficiaries are the same people. Politicians pass seats to their kids, and CEOs keep entire companies in the family. And here on Rice Degree, we're looking at the oldest example Asia has to offer. Forget your boss promoting his clueless son. Japan has a family business that's been running on bloodlines for over 1,400 years. That's what you call hereditary job security. Stick around to find out why this company has been lucky and why nepotism actually creates all kinds of problems. Asians have hardly experienced this strange Western idea of separating business from family. After all, you don't need to hire strangers if you've got the opportunity of keeping everything in-house. Relatives might be useless, but at least they're your useless, and you don't have to go through extensive hiring processes. China actually perfected the manual. There, merchant clans had traded and formed partnerships for centuries. If your surname was weighty enough, doors opened. If it didn't, you stayed outside, no matter how talented you were. India believed in the same principle. Merchant families held onto industries for generations and built dynasties that still dominate. Tata, Birla, Mahindra, and Reliance are all old family houses that gradually turned into giant corporations. We call them business groups, but let's be honest here, they're still family property wearing corporate clothes. Coming to Japan, the land of the rising sun, took the obsession to an entirely different degree. Don't have any heir to take over? No worries, you could adopt a grown man, usually your son-in-law, and pretend the line continued uninterrupted. So, you see, while the West gave speeches about professional management, Asia ran its economies on last names. And if you think this obsession with family control was a passing phase, I'd be happy to disappoint you. Japan is home to a company that took the idea of keep it in the family and turned it into a 1,400-year experiment. Let me introduce you to Kongō Gumi, officially recognized as the world's oldest continuously operating family business. Founded in the year 578 AD, when most of Europe was still arguing about kingdoms, this company was already signing construction deals. It all started when Shigemitsu Kongo, a skilled carpenter from Korea, was invited to Japan to help build a Buddhist temple. The job was completed, but instead of heading back home, he did what any ideal opportunist would do. He stayed and turned his trade into a family business, which specialized in building temples and shrines. The family didn't change direction for the next 14 centuries. They built, repaired, and rebuilt religious structures instead of switching to diversified portfolios. Temples paid the bills, and temples kept the company alive. But how did Kongō Gumi last so long? They did that through adaptation. The techniques changed, and the architectural styles saw thousands of new trends. However, the family stayed glued to a simple strategy that boasts an absurdly long lifespan. And nowhere is that strategy clearer than in how they handled succession. That said, Kongō Gumi has never been content with son inherits business, end of story. They used mukoyoshi, or adult adoption of men, to keep control even when direct heirs weren't up to the job, or didn't exist. If a biological son was useless, or there was no son, they found someone competent, married him in, and made him Kongo by adopting him officially. What could be a smarter way to keep your surname locked in? Do you think it was a charity? Never. The adopted husband often had strings attached. He had to prove himself loyal and follow family customs. Most importantly, he had to live under scrutiny before being fully taken into the family registry. Most modern Japanese adoptions aren't about caring for orphans, but about securing the heir. Over 90% of adoptions are adult males who will continue a family business. In Kongō Gumi's long history, sometimes the eldest son was bypassed. They picked whoever had the skill or temperament, even if that was a younger brother or an adopted man. And to keep succession from turning into a mess, they leaned on a creed, a code with instructions for craftsmanship, behavior, relationships, and continuity. So yes, Kongō Gumi's nepotism was ruthless, but it was also systematized. They treated succession like a procedure, not a ceremony. Want to pitch that at your next corporate HR meeting? They'd laugh, and then quietly file the adoption paperwork. Surviving 14 centuries sounds glamorous until you look closely at what Kongō Gumi actually went through. This wasn't smooth sailing at all. One crisis after another kept on showing up. Let's start with Japan's medieval wars. Temples were prime targets, burned down in the blink of an eye. This was a cultural loss for most people. However, for Kongō Gumi, it was still a steady business. Every time a temple was demolished, they rebuilt it and moved on to the next one. Then came the Meiji Restoration in the 1800s. Japan wanted to modernize, which actually meant smashing Buddhist influence and pushing Shinto. The state backed a movement called Haibutsu Kishaku, which literally tore down thousands of temples. That should have been game over for any company that lived off temple contracts. But Kongō Gumi pivoted. They expanded into commercial construction and experimented with new building materials. That way, they kept the money flowing. World War II made things worse. Allied bombings flattened Osaka and wiped out countless temples and shrines. Once peace returned, Kongō Gumi was right back at it, this time only to rebuild what the bombs had destroyed. You could almost say war guaranteed them work. Fast forward to the 20th century, and tradition alone wasn't enough. Modern architecture demanded design software. Given that context, Kongō Gumi upskilled once again. It smartly blended its ancient carpentry with modern engineering. Survival depended on constant updates, and nostalgia for wooden beams took a backseat. Of course, the biggest test wasn't fire or bombs. It's always been money. In the 1980s, during Japan's economic bubble, Kongō Gumi borrowed heavily and invested in real estate. When the bubble burst in the 1990s, debts crushed them. By 2005, they were making billions of yen in revenue, but were also carrying billions in debt. That balance sheet doesn't care if you've got a 1,400-year history. It cares if you can pay the bills. So yes, the company survived emperors and even religion getting outlawed. But in the end, it stumbled over the same problem as any family shop: bad financial decisions. Practically, Kongō Gumi built a brand out of survival. The label "World's Oldest Family Business" is its lasting trophy. However, that crown buys far more than bragging rights. It commands respect and lets you charge premiums for authenticity. Japan has a few rivals for antiquity. For instance, Hoshu Ryokan, founded in 718 AD and run by the Hoshi family for 46 generations. Nishiyama Onsen Keiyunkan, started in 705 AD, now takes breaks in family control, but still carries centuries of legacy, claims the title of the oldest continually family-run hotel. And then there's Genda Shugyo, a paper goods maker from 771 AD. It's been quietly serving ceremonial markets for over a millennium. Those names remind us that plenty of businesses were old, but Kongō Gumi stretched family control into an era where most others had already moved on. Its status allowed it to pitch prestige contracts for temples and restorations that outsiders couldn't easily win. So yes, the oldest business tagline was a competitive edge indeed. It helped Kongō Gumi stay dynamic enough until money caught up. But nepotism isn't as glorious as it sounds. Theoretically, nepotism always looks neat. The comfort of a familiar surname on the signboard is classy. But have you ever looked at the flip side of the coin? If you do, you will realize it isn't all about fairy tales and thriving businesses. Kongō Gumi was no exception. Passing leadership often created new problems instead of solutions. In the 1930s, Haruichi Kongo, the 37th head, cracked under pressure and took his own life. His widow Yoshie stepped in and became the first woman to run the company. The Mukoyoshi system added its own set of headaches. It technically kept control inside the family, but it also left everyone arguing over who really counted as family. Think of explaining that your heir is simultaneously your son, your son-in-law, and sometimes the stand-in for someone else's son-in-law. Doesn't it seem like a bureaucratic migraine in life? Haruichi was the victim of the Mukoyoshi system and its set of headaches. And these succession quirks aren't some odd Japanese exception. Family firms across the world stumble through the same mess. The main issue is persuading everyone else that the chair doesn't look ridiculous on them. So, you see, while nepotism gave Kongō Gumi centuries of stability, it also chained the company to a delicate setup. Inheritance worked beautifully until debt piled up or egos collided. At that point, heritage started behaving like dead weight. Kongō Gumi's collapse didn't kill its reputation. If anything, it made academics hungrier. Business schools everywhere rushed to turn it into a case study on family enterprises. In Harvard, it's a case study. In Columbia, it's a lecture. And on Rice Degree, it's a free lesson you'll always remember. As long as you like and subscribe, of course.